Emma had spent years alone on her small ranch, working before sunrise and sleeping after midnight. Life hadn't given her much space for dreams, only responsibilities. So when she saw a dusty cowboy riding slowly toward her barn one golden afternoon, she assumed he was just another drifter looking for water or directions. His hat was worn, his boots older than the fence behind him, and he carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many empty miles. She didn't expect him to stop, look at her with steady eyes, and ask gently if she needed help repairing the broken corral. She hesitated. Hiring strangers wasn't her habit, but the storm the night before had destroyed the fencing, and she couldn't fix it alone. The cowboy didn't push, he simply dismounted with the kind of calm that made her curious. He introduced himself as Luke, nothing more, no last name, no place he was headed, no story offered. Emma found herself saying yes, surprised by her own trust. He worked silently beside her for hours, moving with the skill of someone raised around cattle and wind-beaten land. As they hammered the last post into place, the evening sky turned purple. Emma offered him dinner as payment, but when he stepped into her small kitchen, she noticed something strange. The way he glanced around with a mix of nostalgia and loneliness, as if he hadn't eaten in a home for years. He wasn't talkative, but he noticed everything, the cracked window, the worn rug, the picture of her late father. "You run this place alone?" he finally asked, his voice carrying something unspoken. She nodded, wondering what he wasn't saying. Luke returned the next morning before she even woke, already fixing the pasture gate. She found him humming quietly, the sunrise lighting his weathered face. For days he worked without asking for pay, only offering a soft smile when she insisted. Emma began noticing the small ways he eased her burdens, repairing her water pump, calming a frightened horse, teaching her tricks to handle cattle more efficiently. Yet he never talked about himself. The more she tried to understand him, the more mysterious he became. One evening, while they rested on the porch, Emma asked him directly why he wandered alone. Luke stiffened, his gaze drifting toward the mountains. "Some people lose too much," he said quietly. "So they keep moving before anything else can be taken." His words carried the ache of a man who once had a family, a life, a heart, and lost them all. Emma didn't push further. She simply handed him a cup of warm coffee, letting the silence speak what neither of them could. Days turned into weeks. Luke's presence became as natural as sunlight to Emma. He laughed more, carried himself lighter, and even taught her how to fix things she'd struggled with for years. But the more she grew attached, the more she worried. What if he left without warning? Drifters didn't stay. Cowboys like him didn't build roots. And Emma wasn't sure she could watch someone walk away again, not after rebuilding her life piece by fragile piece. Her fears materialized when a black SUV arrived one morning, its shiny paint out of place on dusty ranch land. Two well-dressed men stepped out, calling Luke by a last name she had never heard, Prescott. They spoke to him respectfully, almost formally, asking him to return home. Emma watched in disbelief as Luke's entire posture shifted, like a king putting his crown back on after years in hiding. When the men left, Emma demanded answers. Luke sighed, shoulders heavy. He revealed the truth. He wasn't a drifter at all. He was Luke Prescott, owner of more land than she could imagine, half the state, according to newspapers. He'd walked away from wealth years ago after losing someone he loved, choosing simplicity over power, silence over memories that haunted him. Emma felt like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The cowboy she trusted had been living a double truth. Luke tried to explain that he hadn't lied. He had simply wanted to be treated like a man, not a name. He came to her ranch by chance, but stayed because it felt like the first real home he'd known in years. Emma listened, torn between hurt and understanding. She didn't care about his land or title, she cared that he hadn't trusted her enough to share the truth. Her heart felt heavy, unsure if she could forgive the hidden identity. The next morning, Luke was gone. No note, no goodbye, just the fixed fence, the repaired barn, and the saddle marks where his horse once stood. Emma told herself she should be grateful for his help, but the silence he left behind felt colder than any winter wind. She forced herself back to work, but every chore reminded her of him. She wondered if she had driven him away or if he had always planned to leave. A week passed before another vehicle approached her ranch, this time a single truck, dusty and worn, the same one Luke had driven on his first day. He stepped out slowly, holding his hat in his hands like a man facing judgment. Emma's heart raced, unsure whether to yell or walk away. Luke approached with a calm determination she hadn't seen in him before. "I left because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd look at me the way everyone else does." He told her he didn't want a life of wealth or endless decisions about land he didn't care about anymore. He wanted the quiet mornings at her ranch, the soft conversations over dinner, the peace her presence gave him. He wanted to start over, not as Prescott the landowner, but as Luke the man who had finally learned to hope again. Emma felt her defenses slowly crumble as she realized he wasn't asking her to accept his wealth, only his heart. Emma walked him through the ranch, showing him the repairs she had handled alone that week. Luke listened with admiration, not pity, and told her she was stronger than she knew. For the first time, she saw tenderness in his eyes unclouded by past sorrow. The air between them shifted, a quiet understanding that both of them had been broken before, but maybe together they could rebuild something lasting. That evening, as the sun turned the sky copper and gold, Luke took her hand and promised he would never disappear again. Not because he needed a place to stay, but because he had finally found someone worth staying for. Emma felt something warm bloom inside her, trust, affection, maybe even the beginnings of love. She had seen him at his weakest and his strongest, and both versions were real. In time, Luke formally stepped down from managing his empire, giving the responsibility to people he trusted. He chose a simpler life with Emma, working beside her, repairing fences not out of necessity but joy. The townsfolk whispered stories about the cowboy who owned half the state yet lived on a small ranch with the woman who changed him. And every morning, when Emma saw him smiling at her across the field, she felt certain of one truth. Sometimes the man who seems like a wandering stranger is the one destiny had written for you long before you met.